It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Now, often we call this the messy middle. I mean, for a lot of folks, this is when they make their first home purchase. This is when they end up starting a family. This is when they might make a career change. This is where they might get promoted in their career. A lot happens in this decade. So I think this was a difficult one for me to kind of think about. How do we distill this advice into sort of three like digestible chunks? And the first one is one, we didn't really order these on priority, but I think this is the one that has been the most true in my life. Don't try to be busy. Don't go out there seek busyness, because busy will have a way of finding you in your 30s.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest limitation is just like we talked about in the 20s, time is the most valuable resource because you can invest, you can do other things. You also find out as you get older, time is also the most valuable resource. That's what nobody can buy additional time. Unfortunately, we know we all are on this planet for a certain period of time, so you need to respect what each minute of your life is worth. So be deliberate with your work commitments, with your kid commitments, with your church commitments, your friend commitments. Make every minute count. And I think that so often we take it for granted when we're younger, but I'm telling you, somehow time will disappear if you don't take a very active role in making sure you control where time goes for you.
And I think one of the things, this is from the Oracle of Omaha, this is from Uncle Warren, one of the things that he said he mastered, and I think that in your 30s is really when you have to start mastering this, is understanding how powerful no can be. He had this quote, he says, the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. They recognized how scarce of a resource time is, and they only say yes to the things that are truly valuable. They don't find themselves wasting a lot of time.
So we have an illustration on this, and this is our producer Reeby's favorite illustration, but it does show you, and this is such a unique thing about life, is it will show you the difference, the separation between your income of what you can make plus the life commitments, because we have different stages of life. This is why we always do the by age series, because a 20-something is going to be completely different from a 50-something or even a 40-something. So let's actually put some graphical illustration here. And you can see right after you graduate college, you're probably feeling pretty good because
you got some more disposable income.
Yeah, because you're used to having a life in college where you could make $10 do a lot of things for you, and then you get a little bit extra. You're going to feel great. And usually, if you come out of college and you're not married, you don't have children, the only thing you have to focus on is you, yourself, and I, and that's a very limited window that's the case. But then as you go through time, you'll see your commitments pick up tremendously. It's almost unfair. This is why we call it the messy middle of the 30s, is that all of a sudden life stacks on you very quickly between, marriage, children, financial commitments with houses and other things, because all this stuff seems to get piled in all at the same time, that you will lose your mind in some ways, because you go, man, my income just didn't keep up. But just hang in there, be very deliberate with your money, because it will break loose later. You just have to plan accordingly and also be very practical with how important each dollar that comes in your financial household is.
So if you are someone at the early part of your 30s and maybe you haven't hit this stage yet where all of a sudden that disposable income is dropping and the commitments are increasing, understand that it's coming. And so if you can set yourself up early on to start saving 20 to 25% of your gross income and building that muscle memory, your future self will 100% thank you for having the discipline to do that, so that as it starts to get constrained, as it starts to get tight, you've already built in that habit that's going to cause you to stay the course over the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're always going to need to live on less than you make, so be very deliberate about that. And that leads to number 2. And this is one that blows me, it just bothers me. Don't sweat the small stuff. I mean, and we see so many people, they're so worried about the latte factor and all the little things of life that, yes, nitpick your monthly budget. But that's not, in our experience, that's not the stuff that's actually blowing up your financial life.
Yeah, it's not the latte effect that's going to get you. It's the Lamborghini effect that's going to get you. You really, in your 30s, need to focus on the big decisions that you're making. How much automobile am I going to buy? How much car am I going to buy? What am I going to do in my career? What sort of vocation am I going to pursue? How am I going to shift? What part of the country am I going to live in? It's the big decisions that are going to have the big long tail impacts on your life. I wouldn't worry so much about, am I eating lunch out every day. Now, yes, of course, that can affect your finances, and going to Starbucks can affect your finances, but don't become so laser focused on the small stuff that you lose sight of the bigger financial items that you're navigating.
I mean, the housing purchases or what your rent is compared to what you're paying on your car payments, all those things go way more impactful. The housing, the cars, the debt is going to hurt you much more than just incremental little $3 to $4 decisions. Now, I will tell you also, this is a part where when we're talking about don't sweat the small stuff, yes, we're talking about the coffees and other things, but what will combat this is if you set up an automatic investment plan, just automate your money so that you don't even have to sweat the small stuff because things are happening automatically for you.
Another part of not sweating the small stuff is sometimes you get so caught in the moment that things that are a very big deal you think turn out to not be that big of a deal, and things that you don't recognize are a big deal actually end up being a big deal. And Brian, you've done great for me on this because your kids are now a little bit older, and you tell me over again, Bo, I see when you come in and you're tired and your kids have just taken you for a ride over the last couple of days and this has happened. He goes, just bottle it up and remember it because this too shall pass, and you'll miss it. You'll miss those times when these were the problems that you had to deal with. So take a second to pause and reflect on what are those things that really matter that I should focus on, and what are the things that, okay, maybe it's not such a big deal if I've got crumbs in the floorboard of the car right now.
Yeah, remember, memories blossom. So even the things that are causing you lots of heartache and stress right now, you might come to look back on and laugh about, whether it's the kids throwing up at the most inopportune place or, if you go on a vacation that turns out that you stayed in the shadiest hotel. I mean, all those things turn into fun little anecdotes later that you'll look back. Like I said, memories blossom. They get better with time. So don't sweat the small stuff. The biggest thing, and this is what I pick on Bo about, and he's done a very good job of transitioning. Achievers, sometimes we are so worried about the checklist that we forget to actually enjoy the life that we live. And remember, you only get one time on this planet. So let's make sure that we're enjoying each stage of our life.
All right, so then the third piece of advice that we were trying to distill for those in their 30s, and this is a little bit of cold water. If by the time you're in your 30s, you have not grown up, it's time to grow up. When you're 20s, you can get away with, okay, yeah, maybe I spent a little frivolously, and maybe I didn't start saving, and maybe I ignored this part of my financial life. By the time you get to your 30s, you got to start taking it seriously because all of a sudden that time that you had abundantly in your 20s is now rapidly starting to evaporate in your 30s, and that commitment-free life that you were living in your 20s may not be the same circumstance you're living in your 30s.
Yeah, you're going to get squeezed. So let's talk about specifically, we're talking about like life insurance. Guys, if you have a spouse, you have children, make sure you're protecting them. Buy some term life insurance. It's cheap. It will give them lots of protection and coverage. Do the estate plans, like to have a will for the kids and your spouse. Savings rate, no excuse that you're not in the 20-25% once you get into your 30s. And then make sure you've built in the success habits that you're doing where you're enjoying your family at night. You also have good separation on the weekends, and you know what is your why and what makes you tick.